Well, welcome everybody. Thank you guys for coming. And I wanted to thank in particular Dr. Pugh, Dr. Bowling, and Mr. Hamilton for coming and being our speakers, current and previous working in positions of being principals in schools. We're just really looking forward to hear all of y'all's expertise and wisdom with being involved in the world of teaching in Georgia. And so I'd love to give each of y'all the floor to introduce yourselves, mention your name, what school you're currently working at, the positions you've held, etc. So Dr. Bowling, would you like to start us off?
I'd be glad to. Thanks, Raleigh. My name is Brad Bowling. I am the Director of Special Education for Barrow County Schools, which is in Winder. It's in between Gwinnett and Athens, if you're not familiar. My background is in special education. I've always taught special education, pretty much the whole realm. I started my career in Forsyth County, and I came to Barrow County, taught for 6 years there. Then I came to Clark County here in Athens. I was an assistant principal for 3 years at a middle school, 1 year at a high school. Then I went back to Barrow County to be a principal for 3 years at a middle school, and then I became director of special education 3 years ago. So thank you guys for inviting me. I'm glad to be here.
We're glad to have you. Dr. Pugh, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Dana Pugh. I'm principal at Grayson High School here in Gwinnett County. This is my 15th year as a principal. I started my career in DeKalb County as an elementary school teacher, 5th grade. And so I've had the pleasure of working at each level, elementary, middle, and high school. Now, I was a counselor as well as an elementary setting. Then I became an assistant principal in Gwinnett at Hull Middle School. My first principalship was at Summer Hour Middle School, very diverse school, in 2004. And so I went from Summer Hour, had an experience to open up a brand new school, Bay Creek Middle School, that didn't exist. So I got a chance to build a culture in 2009, and in 2014 got a chance to go up to the high school, the Grayson High School. So I've been there the last 7 years now. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much. And then Mr. Hamilton, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. My name is Eric Hamilton, and I am an assistant principal currently at North Oconee High School. Started out in education as a high school math teacher. I did that for 12 years and taught all of the high school math courses. Became a department head. Really loved that. Really kind of still consider myself a math teacher at heart. And I moved into administration, and I've had assistant principalships at North Augusta High School in North Augusta, South Carolina. Did that for a few years and then moved back here to Georgia as an assistant principal at Morgan County High School, and was there for about 7 years. And then after that time period, I went to work for College Board and worked in the Advanced Placement Division, the AP division, as a director of pre-AP mathematics and curriculum and content development for them. Initiate that project. Now, those products that you might see them marketing and selling for pre-AP courses, myself and another now principal at elementary school in Atlanta, we started that project for them back in 2012, 13, something like that. Left there and then took a position at North Oconee High School, which is where I currently am, and have really loved that school. If you're not familiar with that school, is right near Athens, bedroom community of Athens, and so been there for about this is my 7th year, I think, and pretty much that's it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So the way that we've kind of devised this meeting or the panel is that we've separated some questions. So I want to first talk about hiring and applying interviewing processes. So I'm going to start with some questions. Hopefully our 3 panelists, you guys can just jump in as you feel that you have knowledge to share. And then if there's anything further we wanted to discuss or questions that can be asked, we'll go to that towards the end. So the first question I'm going to introduce is, what does the hiring process look like? Who is there, and what should our prospective teachers expect when going in?
I'll start. Well, the hiring process should begin with the candidate searching the district's webpage and looking for the vacancies that they have an interest in, because most of the jobs are posted on a local site on the district webpage. From there, the principals, and in my case, or I'll say I will look at the applicants on the website, pull their resumes, and begin to cull through their experience or their educational background. In you all's cases, being new beginning teachers, cull through their background and see what their experiences have been in their student teaching, what that has been like. Once we select some candidates to bring in, people present will be myself, the assistant principal that's responsible for the math department, and the department chair, who's a math teacher in the building, and sometimes also a current math teacher in the building. So therefore, I'm getting teacher participation and voice, as well as the department's chair's voice and the AP that's responsible for that department. So it's going to be from 3 to 4 people generally for the interview.
Okay, another great question that we got. A lot of these questions are from our student responses, so they're hopefully going to have all of their wildest questions answered today. So the next question, I'm also posting these in the chat as we go along, is, what is your favorite thing to hear from a prospective teacher during the hiring process?
So I won't be shy. There's certain questions on here I picked that I really liked that I want to answer. So I'm trying to be selective in which ones I answer. But I really look for a sense of selflessness. And some of the answers I'll give are maybe unorthodox, but I look for a sense of selflessness, because I believe that we're in a profession that's really not. Of course, you have to feed the teachers or they'll eat the students, as they say, but I'm looking for selflessness. I'm looking for someone who is, committed to kids at the end of the day. I worry a lot about classroom management, and I think that's just my background in dealing with students with challenging behaviors. That's pretty much been the mark of my career. So I look for elements of, like I said, selflessness, a commitment to students first, and someone who knows how to manage a classroom. I think content and pedagogy, if you will, is important, but I have a strong belief in the need to build relationships with kids in ways that improve teaching and learning. And so while you may think, we would look for, your content expertise, I'm really looking for those kinds of things first. And then, with the ability that we could mold you into an effective instructor, I guess, if you will. So that'll be my answer for that one.
All right, wonderful, thank you. Oh, Dr. Pugh, did you have something to add?
Yes. Also, I concur with what Brad is saying. I look for the passion for the will to teach is what I'm looking to sense when I'm talking with someone, and that comes through. So I'm looking for the passion for the will to teach, and then I'm looking for someone who talks also about how to build relationships, because it's vitally being able to connect with the students, and therefore you can get them to the content if you can build a positive relationship. Because if you're coming out of the University of Georgia or any university, the content to me is a given. You've gotten your degree, you've made it through, but how do you go about building a relationship? How do you go about connecting to the young people, and that passion for your subject? How does that come through? So those are some of the things that I'm looking for when I'm interviewing.
Sorry, I got cut off if my internet goes in and out, I'm having internet issues out here, and the rain seems to have brought some connection problems. So I'm trying with my cell phone. Hopefully that will make it better. But I just wanted to add, in terms of interviewing and what we're looking for in the hiring process, we're looking for teachers or candidates that we feel will have an impact on students and student achievement and student success. And so, we try to look for those things in the interview, in the resume, in the references that would lead us to believe that this particular individual, for whatever position that we're trying to fill, will have an impact, a positive impact with student achievement, student success, and the overall student experience.
The next question is, what are some quote unquote red flags that would make you less likely to hire someone that comes up in the interviewing process?
Well, number one would be the poor references from the supervising teacher and or other references. Also on the application, there are two questions asked in most instances. Would you hire this person to teach your child or your children? And if that's marked as no, then I wouldn't even bring them in for an interview. And so your references are very, very, very important. And also, if the student teaching experience was not a very positive one, or practicum was not very positive as well, because what you have to understand, there's someone always watching, so that when we're checking references, because the principal has to check each reference. So when we're calling, we're not just calling the supervising teacher, we're also calling the professor and how you interact within the classroom. So the feedback from the professor also gives insight. So that's a red flag too, about the feedback that the professor gives as well. So we're listening and looking for those things as well.
I think that's a great point. I would add that it's important who you select as your references. So for instance, if you left off your supervising teacher, that's kind of a red flag to me. The folks who have supervised you, if you're just listing references as friends or family members, oftentimes it's better to be transparent in who you're listing, because we're going to want to hear from someone who has supervised you or who can speak to your performance. So when those folks are missing as references, that's always a red flag for me.
And I would just add, in terms of red flags, if we get to the interview process and we're asking questions, and there just seems to be a lack of enthusiasm, attentiveness, passion for the job or what you're interviewing for, a lack of imagination, or the desire to be innovative. Those kind of things can come across really in our questioning, and in your desire to sell yourself and you as a potential candidate. And if we don't really see that, in the first 5-10 minutes, if it gets that far, you're going to hear Dr. Brown say, well, what questions do you have for us? And that's like you to know that you're that this is not going any further. So I would say, just a huge red flag is just, not being prepared to show your enthusiasm, passion, innovation, your imagination for the position that you're applying for.
Also, I'd add, I think someone spoke this earlier, I was listening before I signed on, but punctuality. If you're late, it shows a lack of respect for that person's time and your seriousness about your career. But it may sound a little old-fashioned, but I must say it. Appearance. How do you appear for the job? You don't have to have a suit, tie on, or anything like that, or a dress suit, but you need to be neat. Not just like you rolled out of the bed. You'd be surprised when some folk walk in, their clothes are wrinkled as if they just got up and they rushed and they got there. And so those things just shows a lack of commitment and taking the task serious. So those are red flags. If it seems like you're flying by the seat of your pants, then you'll be flying by the seat of your pants in that classroom. So those are some things that sort of turn me off. And if you're sitting in that interview, like Eric is saying, I'll probably say after 2 or 3 minutes, what questions do you have of us? Because usually 2 or 3 of us in there, and it's pretty much over at that point. So just be mindful of those things.
Good, thank you. And then one last question that we have from this category is how free are teachers to be able to barter to get a higher salary?
Coming out of college in our district, not free at all. It's pretty much a given. Years of experience and level of education is what's going to define that. So I think I think you can only start bartering up there with the superintendent is when you can start bartering. Until then, no.
Yes,
Or
there's
maybe, if you're a hotshot head football coach or head basketball coach, you probably could do some bartering with your supplement, but otherwise, the teaching salary part is pretty set.
Yeah, and that's set at the state. The state has a scale, and so based on the state scale and what the local county supplements, that's pretty much a set scale.
And one thing I wanted to add just real quick on the question, because I was thinking about the one that says, what is one question you hate to hear in an interview? And I'm just saying that because I heard it today. I was in an interview and the question was basically about the hours of work. And, I'm not saying that you can't get to that, but that doesn't need to be one of the first questions you ask is, how long do I have to be here? So I think it's important to show that you're committed to not only your work as a teacher, but it's okay to volunteer, especially when you're a new teacher. Clubs, and that was one question we asked is what extracurricular activities are you willing to support? And so I just want to throw that in there that it's important that you're willing to go above and beyond just being a classroom teacher. And also I wouldn't ask right out of the gate, what time do I get to go home? So.
And to add to Dr. Boland's point there, one question we hate to hear is, do you require teachers to turn in their lesson plans? And while we don't require them at our school or in our district, you should be excited to show them if they're asked of you. So asking that in an interview question kind of leads us to believe that you don't like planning, and so which then by transference means you probably won't be an effective teacher. And so that for that reason, don't ask that question either about are lesson plans required. Just assume that they are.
While we're discussing this, what are some good questions that you like to hear during an interview?
I would say a good question that we'd like to hear from potential candidates is, what are some of the ways that you utilize, new hires, new teachers, to add to your overall school experience? What clubs do you need support in? What sports do you, need help with coaching in? Show us that you're interested in the overall function of the school, not just your classroom.
Also, questions asking what type of technology support and training do we have in place to help supplement the teachers' learning and advancement in the new technologies that are out there. Questions centered around how do I help myself get better? And so that the teachers searching for ways to make sure that they're going to be supported and given opportunities to grow in the profession.
I'll just add real quick. I always enjoy questions that are trying to elicit an understanding of the culture and climate of the school to kind of assess, will I be a good fit in that school? A lot of principals, I mean, I loved telling about my school and about the culture and climate and about what we were looking for. So while I wouldn't say, what's your culture and climate like? I would design a question that kind of gets at giving them an opportunity to tell you, what they're looking for and the culture and climate of the school.
Wonderful, thank y'all. So now we're going to move on to one of the second sections, which is more specifically focusing on first-year teachers. So the first question that I'm going to be putting in the chat is, what is the way that your school helps first-year teachers to adjust to the new job?
Good question. One of the ways we help is that we assign first-year teachers a mentor that's teaching in their content area, so they have a person that they can go directly to for support and guidance. And it's a year-long partnership with that mentor. But we also provide professional training in the spring prior to that person starting there in the fall. And so they can get a jump on planning, and they can plan with their mentor as well as their team members the content, and they get to see it. So they help participate and rather listen to the building of the units and building of the assessments, so that in August, they're not starting from scratch. We start this process like in May, so they get to come in and work with that mentor teacher and work through that process and see how it works. So it helps prepare them for what's to come in the fall, so they're not starting from scratch. So giving them a mentor, train them for the entire year with that mentor, and give them someone they could go to in case they have just basic general questions. So having a mentorship program, a new teacher induction program, it helps our brand new teachers.
And I would add to that, we also have a new teachers orientation at the beginning, a couple weeks before school begins, so that we can not only have time for our new teachers and their mentors to meet and to continue to get to know each other, but also the admin team, the counselors, the administrative assistants, everyone can be present to, share about, various things about the school. So that helps them get familiarize themselves with how things work at our school.
And I will add, one of my favorite conversations to have with new teachers is to find your marigold. And I don't know if you guys have heard this, but basically it's the essential lesson every new teacher should learn. People plant marigolds around crops to make the soil more fertile. And you're to beware of the walnut tree. And that's, you don't plant crops around a walnut tree because they're acidic and they don't nourish. And you're going to come across, folks that sometimes will be like walnut trees, and they're going to tamper your growth. And so we always encourage our teachers to find that relationship with a marigold, and we try to cultivate that, like both of the other panelists were saying. And we would take an approach of, as a family, it's all of our responsibility to show you where the copy machine is, to show you how to do ABC. Everyone should be helping you do that. But that teacher mentor relationship should be a marigold to a vegetable seed, I guess, for a lack of better terms, and try to cultivate that positivity and growth outside of, where's the copy machine. So that's the only thing I'll add to that.
All right, another question is, what advice have you given your teachers that have made the most difference within the classroom?
So I love this question. Someone said it to me early on. I think you guys probably get the sense, and I'm kind of like this motivational type person. Anyways, he said, a child will learn a lot more for you than they will from you. So getting at what Dr. Pugh first talked about is that the importance is developing a relationship. They don't care what you know until they know that you care. You got to reach them before you teach them. And that is super important because it's not that you're this knowledge of mathematics that you're pouring into these crevices of minds. That does no good unless you can build that relationship. So I would say, when I say a child will learn a lot more for you than from you, when you establish that relationship, it motivates them to better themselves, to want to work with you. And I can't underemphasize the importance of working to get to know your students, develop relationships with them. And now, hey, don't get me wrong, the math is absolutely vital and absolutely important, but it's very important, just as important in my opinion, to develop those positive relationships with your students.
And I would say further along the lines of getting to know your students' names and know one personal thing about each and every one of them. Therefore, when you're having those small conversations with them, they know that you genuinely care about them as a person and as an individual. So when you start talking about the math with them, the wall is down, the wall is not up. They're more comfortable with you and more apt to give you true feedback as to what they really don't know, because you've built that bond, you've built that trust, and you've made that connection with them, getting to know them outside of the math. And it lets them know that you genuinely care about them as an individual, and then the math will come.
And I would just add to what Dr. Pugh and Dr. Bullen have said, with providing the new hires, the new teachers in particular, with expert teachers in the building to go watch and mimic and see, talk to with. No new teacher coming in the building, particularly if you're fresh out of college, has developed the toolbox and the skills and the savvy necessary to be that great and successful teacher just yet. But there are teachers in the building that have been doing it for a long time, that have a track record of success. They know how to develop relationships with students. They know how to structure their classroom so that students are engaged at all times. They know how to get little Johnny in the corner of the room to pay attention. They know how to get Susie to get where she is comfortable with raising her hand and asking questions and not feeling shy. And so, the first thing I try to do with our new teachers is find the teachers in the building during their that have classes during their planning period that they can go watch, that they can go speak to, and spend some time with, learning the craft, because it's an art and a science, learning the craft of teaching, and making sure that the new hires know that it's okay to try something and fail. Go watch somebody and figure it out, and ask them what they do and how do they get to the point where they can feel through the landmines in the classroom and the setups by the students when they're trying to catch you or figure out what button to push and get you off track, because all those things will happen. They happen to everybody, no matter how long you've been teaching. But there are certain individuals in the building that have developed skills and a craft for the profession that they're able to navigate that with a lot of success. So, the best thing I can do as an administrator is point that person, that new hire, to the right teacher in the building to say, hey, go spend time with Miss So-and-so, with Mr. So-and-so, because they've got it figured out.
Thank you. I want to move on to this question. I feel like this is kind of leading into what we're talking about with new teachers. So what do you think is one of the biggest struggles or pitfalls you see among first-year math teachers?
Probably the lack of planning in some instances, and understanding how much planning you really have to do. Probably speaking to Mr. Hamilton's point of, because if that lesson is not going quite the way you want it to go, you've got to have a plan B to be able to shift. So just realizing how much planning and how much time has to really be put in to developing your lessons along the way. So I think that lack of preparation sometimes shows up for new teachers. and not realizing also sometimes how fast students will grasp something. And so now they're ready to move on. And so if you have not planned well enough or enough, and they're going to eat you up. So that's really something that I do see sometimes, that lack of planning and preparation on the front end for brand new teachers.
I think that's a great point. I'll just add, I wasn't, a lot of my experience has been in middle school, and we all know that those are some crazy times in folks' lives. But I will say that I worry about classroom management a lot. That things are out of control, and nothing can be accomplished. And they say that the best classroom management plan is a solid lesson plan. And so I think it's really important what Dr. Pugh shared, because if you're not well planned, they will eat you up, and it's hard to manage the classroom.
And I would just add to what Dr. Pugh and Dr. Boylan have said, in terms of planning. Obviously, you really want to overplan and also to think deeper than what you are accustomed to thinking. Coming out of college as a high school math teacher, what I learned quickly was, even though if I had good plans, my first year teaching, and really my first couple of years teaching, I was at a high school, Lakeside High School, right outside of Augusta, and the department was full of veteran teachers. We got there. Miss Corley was my mentor. She handed me a 3-ring binder with the lesson plans for the year, and she said, we've already figured this part out. You just got to do what this binder tells you to do. We'll meet every few days to talk about each lesson, each day's plans, the quizzes that we're going to give, the tests that we're going to give, and you got to keep up with what we're doing, because this is how we do things here, at Lakeside High School. And so, wonderful lady, great advice. But what I didn't account for, was how much I had to think about what I was teaching. And so I would say to first year teachers, think about what you're teaching. Keep asking yourself why. Whatever you're teaching, ask about 4 or 5 whys to what that lesson is about. Because I guarantee you're going to get into a classroom and the kid's going to say, well, I don't understand. Why are you doing it that way? Why is that? Well, why is that? And because as a math teacher, you've probably been very good at math your entire life, you've never asked all those why questions. But the kid who doesn't understand it, doesn't get it, doesn't think absolutely, can't see the connections between the concepts and the material that's not tangible. Actions. And you need to try to answer those questions. You're not going to be able to answer all of them, but that getting to the whys of what you're teaching is so important in the math class. It let me learn early on that I was not probably going to be a great geometry teacher, because it was difficult for me, to dig down into the whys to explain it to someone who didn't get it. But the other maths, I was much better at teaching. And I tell people all the time, you'll figure out what your strengths and weaknesses are that way. But asking yourself why will prepare you for the students who just don't understand. And you'll find out that you'll begin to develop really good relationships with students who, because you can answer their questions. And so that's really important.
Okay, there's one more question that I wanted to get to before I moved on to the next section. And this is, what would you most like to see when observing classrooms of new teachers?
Wow, that's a good question. A very active learning classroom, noise, collaboration, problem solving, a clear focus on the goals, students working in partnerships. When I walk into a classroom, I like to see that active learning taking place. Now, there's an art to that. But before you can get to that, you've got to have had established certain protocols so that the students know what the expectations are. But that's the ultimate point where I would like to see an active classroom. I'm not looking for rows. I'm not looking for isolation and silo teaching and students working alone, because we are social beings. We have to work with partners in all of our jobs. So seeing students collaborate, to problem solve, to discuss ideas, to banter back and forth about how to solve problems is what I'm actively looking for, with a clear objective stated and a clear learning goal stated, so the students know what the focus is for that day. So I'm looking for the clear learning goal. I'm looking for the clear focus. And once the students have been given that, I'm looking for an active classroom to see those problems being resolved amongst the students, and the teacher facilitating the learning. Facilitating the learning, not the only one talking in the classroom. Because when I go into a classroom, I don't even look at the teacher. I'm looking at the students to see if they're understanding the concepts. I'm reading their facial expressions. I'm listening to their conversations, and that lets me know whether or not they have an idea what the concepts are and what the teacher is talking about.
And I will just add to what Dr. Pugh's already said. By saying one thing I don't want to see when I go into a new teacher's classroom is the teacher sitting behind the desk and the students are doing whatever it is that they're doing and the teacher's doing something completely different. I want to see active teaching, and that, as he said, doesn't mean that the teacher is doing all the talking, because I don't want to see that either. But when I go into a new teacher's classroom and you're sitting at your desk, and if kids are testing, that's one thing. But if the kids are working, students are working on problems or doing an assignment, and you're not up trying to monitor what they're doing, monitor their and assess whether they are actually getting the concepts and understanding what you taught, that's somewhat of a red flag to me, that perhaps something's wrong, or maybe you're not up to the task for the job. And so don't want to see teachers always sitting behind their desks.
And I'll never miss an opportunity to speak, so I'll just throw in there. I feel like a lot of the advice we've given you is like, oh my gosh, I got to do this, and this, and this. One of the things I don't like to see when I walk in is something different than what's normally happening. And I mean that by, oh no, there's the principal, or there's someone here to observe me, so now I'm going to put on a show. So I want to encourage you that you're not going to be perfect out of the gate. You're going to fail. But I think Mr. Hamilton said it early on, think outside the box, be creative, try to engage students. And don't just, it's not about just coming in there and just doing right when the principal's in there. It's using it as a learning experience to really grow. So I do want to encourage you in that regard. And then the other thing, just by nature of what I do for a living, I'm looking at differentiation. That there are efforts, and that goes back to planning, to really try to reach all students, and look to differentiate. And that's a great buzzword, and no one's really mastered it in the history of education. But I do look to see that, you're aware of all students in the classroom, and you're aware of their needs, and you're working to try to meet those needs individually and collectively.
And also to Dr. Bowling's point, I'd like to point out, because if you're doing something different that you don't normally do when the principal or assistant principal walks in, or a visitor, the students will give you away also, because they start looking around, going, what's this? What's going on? We've never done that before. Why are you asking me that? So you're out of your routine. The students will give that away also, because again, I just look at their faces and look at what's happening. And then they begin to ask the teacher questions. So you're busted, for lack of a better term, because that's not your normal routine. So stick with your normal routine, but have processes and procedures in place so that when you do have a visitor, the students don't even look up. It's like clockwork. You're there. Oh, well, they're glad you're there. They don't even care that you're there, but they're going about their business. So those are some of the things that I look for as well.
Thank you guys. The next category that I wanted to bring up for discussion was about the school environment. So I'm sort of combining a couple questions because I want to be conscientious of your times. But I would like to ask, how would you describe the culture of your school and what makes a good math teacher fit into that culture?
Well, that's a loaded question. I would say the culture of our school is one of a collaborative environment. A collaborative environment, but also centered and focused on student leadership. Because I often tell the students, it's your school, and you determine the culture and how you want your school to function and go. And also remind the teachers that the students have a voice. So we focus a lot on student leadership through it. It could be through advanced placement programs. It could be through a course in which we teach leadership that we have, but also through mentoring programs that we have in the building to give students voices, but also allowing the teachers to lead as well through your teacher leadership programs and department chairs. And so that way it's not top down, meaning from the principal's office down to the students. It really can be a horizontal approach to leadership and having a collaborative voice that everyone has an input, because so goes the school, so goes the students. So it's really the students' school. And I like to give the students voice as well as the teachers having a voice as to how we're going to do things, what things could and should look like, and having everybody have a seat at the table to give input to get things done. I generally throw things out to open. I tell the teachers and the students, I have one vote, generally it's veto power. So for the most part, I try to give the authority to the students and teachers to get things done. But if it's against any kind of policy or procedure, then I have to use my veto power. But other than that, we try to have a collaborative approach and give teacher voice as well as student voice because it is their school.
I would say at North Oconee, our culture is one of collegiality and high expectations. We have a certain, kind of set of academic standards that we'd like to adhere to and to uphold. And, we kind of expect that, to be carried through, not just in our AP classes, for which, we have about 36% of our students enrolled in AP classes, but even in our support classes, in our CTAE classes, in PE and team sports, we want students to be engaged at high levels. And so as a math teacher coming into the building, you've got to figure out how best to design your classes and your instructional strategies and the environment in your classroom to fit that sense of high expectations, collegiality. Students have a lot of freedom, perhaps that they wouldn't at other schools, just because of kind of where we're located, rural, very rural and suburban area of the county, and the parent community that we serve, and kind of able to do that. Not all schools are just not able to do that, even if they would like to. And so the students kind of develop a sense of a freeness in their learning and their and what they're able to do. And so you've got to marry that kind of environment with your style of teaching and your strategies that you use in your classroom, and and without relenting the high expectations that you have for their achievement. So our math teachers, for one, we're interviewing now for a position or two, and I said to one of our interviewees last week that they're probably the hardest working group of individuals in the building because of that just level of high expectations and how difficult it is to marry that with kind of a freeness that isn't usually found in a lot of high schools our size. And so so figuring that out, it can somewhat be tricky for an individual, but that's kind of the culture and climate of our school, and you got to work hard at it. That would be the only thing. The other thing that I would say is that to be a good math teacher at whatever school, you got to work hard. It's hard work if you're going to be a good teacher. You've got to plan well. You've got to think of all of the circumstances and difficulties that you might encounter. Have plan B, plan C, plan D. You've got to be prepared to come early, to meet with students, to help them, to stay after school, to meet with them, to help them, those that are struggling, no matter what level of math that you're teaching. You got to help them in the enrichment period, if there's one built into your school day. The good fit to be a math teacher at my school is you got to come prepared to work, because it's hard work. It's very rewarding, but it's also difficult. So that's kind of the things that I think would make you a good fit.
So I'll just add, I think in a lot of ways too, depending on what your passion is, what level you want to teach at, where you want to teach, primarily by nature of my experience, I've worked with at-risk kids, whether that be low socioeconomic, students with disabilities, and so on and so forth. So I always kind of started out with, at the end of the day, I really want three things when hiring any teacher. And I would say, I want you to be, try to commit to selflessness in a way that you're laser-like focused on the best interest of students. And that's hard to do, especially when you're coming out of college, to understand that it's really not about me at the end of the day. While we want to support teachers, I'm not saying that, but it's about these kids. So a laser-like focus on students. I ask teachers that they be reflective in practice, that they don't come out of the gate, even if they, those who teach must never cease to learn. So they're reflective. They're always trying to get better and grow. And then the third thing is try to come to work with a positive attitude, because the kids need that. And so they can read it if you're being a bit cynical and that kind of thing. And so now you have to understand that the three panels, our experiences are all very different, and we're all looking for very different types of people. And so this is not to minimize the importance of someone that is strong in content. Certainly with Mr. Hamilton's background, the AP classes and that kind of thing, those are all important things. And I didn't say I'd never give attention to those things, but in working with the populations that I work with, it was always very important that I saw those three things, or I wanted them to know up front, hey, this is what we expect at the end of the day. If you can do those three things, then we'll be able to work with you, as long as you don't violate the code of ethics. But we'll work with you and try to help you there. So content is important, but and pedagogy is important, but I'm really looking at the right fit, I guess, for the family in those three regards.
And that's a very good question, Raleigh, because culture could trump a whole lot of things in a school. And you need to be, and each school has its own culture. So you have to be aware of that. And that's why fit is so vitally important, like Dr. Bolin is saying. So each one of us have different experience in our schools in different places. So we're looking for different candidates. And so you have to know your fit as well and what your strengths are as a teacher and as an instructor also. So it's very important, but each school has its own culture and you need to know what that is. That's a very good question.
That's a very good point. Thank you. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. And as we're coming to the close, I wanted to open the floor to any questions that any of other participants have. I have plenty more to ask if somebody doesn't have another question. But overall, I'm very appreciative of all of y'all contributing to this conversation. I just want to open the floor to anything.
I personally am interested in coaching football. I already volunteer my time at a high school. And so I was wondering how I go about that process too. Like in a job where I could be a football coach.
I'm gonna let the two high school principals answer that one first.
You're so kind. Charlie, Mr. Farmer, I would reach out to the head coach of that school that you have and let them know you have an interest. in coaching, and seeing if you can get an interview with them, because that's a very close fraternity, that coaching business. So those guys are a little quirky sometimes. So you have to reach out to the head coach, see if you can get an interview with him, let them know you're willing to come in to volunteer, like you just said, but also you're willing to learn and cut your teeth. And most high school coaches will take a new person because they need a 9th grade guy. So I would throw out there, hey, listen, I'm willing to coach 9th grade and cut my teeth and learn, because you don't get many high school coaches. They hate 9th grade. They don't think they're varsity coaches. And so if you can say, listen, I'm willing to volunteer and coach 9th grade, you'd probably get snatched up pretty quickly, because some of those veterans, they don't want to do that. Some of them all think they're Nick Saban or somebody, I don't know. Well, in Georgia, Kirby Smart, I believe. I'm a Bama fan, as you can tell. But so I would reach out to the head coach and say, listen, I'm willing to volunteer, or I'm willing to coach 9th grade for you. And that'll get you a foot in.
I'll also add to that, Charlie. I coached football and basketball in high school. And I think that's very important to reach out to the head coach and kind of develop and cultivate. That can sometimes help you along. I would encourage you, as you speak with, when you're interviewing for the job of teacher, I think, I'm not going to say most coaches, coaches I worked for, you're teacher first. Your teacher first, and then your coach second. And that's sometimes hard for folks that are really passionate about football. But I'm certainly not discouraging you from pursuing that route. But I would just be sure you market yourself as a teacher first, and then coaching second. And coaching's great. It's awesome, and it's much needed. But that would be my encouragement to you in the process.
And I would just add to that. First I'm going to disagree with Dr. Pugh, and I'm going to say that they don't think that they're Nick Saban or Kirby Smart. Most of them think that they're Bill Belichick. They're ready. They're next in line to coach the Patriots. But Charlie, I would say not only volunteer and try to get your name out there, but also set up some one-on-one interviews, or sometimes find a couple of head coaches. In whatever level or area that you're interested in working in, or what area that that you're interested in working in, and ask them some things that that they look for in an assistant, or ways that they think would be beneficial for you as you're growing and learning to be a coach. Ask them for guidance in that way. Like, tell me some things that you're looking for, and what are some things that I need to learn. What are some techniques? So, maybe with some clinics that I could attend right now while you're still learning, and even before you get a job, that you could attend and learn some things. And so that's kind of a way that you get your name, thrown into the ring for potential positions that may open up to be the 9th grade coach or JV coach, or offensive line person, or whatever it may be. So that would be one thing that I would add.
And also, Charlie, I liked when you send your resume to the principal, make sure, like Dr. Boland is saying, make sure that it's your teaching resume. I get resumes from guys that are interested in coaching, and well, they say teaching, but they send a resume and it has all coaching experience. I throw them away because that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a teacher. So when you have 2 resumes, one that you send to the head coach, the football one, but send the principal your teaching credentials and what your experience, your student teaching experiences, and what you've done at the schools, because that's what I'm looking for. And so my athletic director finally figured it out. So he would forward me some resumes. I said, man, why'd you send me that? I said, I'm looking for a teacher. Don't send me that. And so that's just something to be mindful of. And also when it comes to coaching, and I'll get off after this, the coaches get a supplement. And sometimes I have to remind guys, you can live, this is what I tell them, you can live off of a supplement, but you can't live on one. That's a reminder that you are a teacher. I hired a teacher, not a coach. You get a supplement to coach. You get a salary to be a teacher.
Thank you.
One thing that helps you,
Excellent
Mr. Yeah, one thing that helps you, Mr. Farmer, is that you are a math teacher. A lot of times, folks will want to, and because math is a needed field, special education is a needed field. So a lot of times, if you come out of college and you want to teach, 4 periods of weight training, those positions aren't open for the guy fresh out of school. So I would say, really, dive into the teaching portion, but it's great that you're a math teacher who also, wants to coach. I didn't ever see a lot of that. So that's encouraging, but keep the teaching first.
Thank you.
Well, unless there are any other questions that anybody wanted to ask before we wrapped up, we've hit that time. Okay, well then I just wanted to thank all of our panelists, Mr. Hamilton, Dr. Bowling, and Dr. Pugh. Thank you all so much for agreeing to come and share your wisdom and expertise. I know this is going to be very beneficial, not just to the people who are here, but to the many students who will be sharing with this afterwards as well. So I just want to thank you all for contributing your time and being willing to answer our questions.
Thank you all.
You're most welcome.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for having us. I just want to say to those who are attending, will be watching the recording, you'll hear a lot of times people will tell you, you don't want to teach. I've been doing this forever. And I personally think it's the most rewarding, thing I ever could do with my life. So I'm encouraged that we have folks interested in teaching math. And so I hope anything that I shared today didn't discourage you from the profession. It is a noble calling, and you're going to do great. So stay enthused about the profession and enthused about math because we need good quality in this profession for sure.
I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity to visit with you guys to talk about the profession of teaching and also to encourage you to push forward, to put your best foot forward. And I'm always recruiting. So if you need a math position, contact me at Grayson High School, and I'm your guy. So I have to sell my school in our program, and it's a great place to be. I have a saying and a motto. Our motto at school is first comes learning, but I have to remind folks that Grayson has always been great. Grayson is great, and Grayson will continue to be great. So give me a call if you need a math job. Thank you.
I actually wanted to know what high school are y'all from? Oh, you said Grayson, but
I'm at North Laconia High School.
I am in Barrow County. I'm now director of special education, but I was at Westside Middle School as the principal.
thank you.
Well, everyone, thank you again for joining. I hope everyone has a wonderful night. Stay safe in the rain and the fluctuating weather. We'll see y'all soon.